This thing. Oh. Hello, folks. Welcome to part 1 of the Filmtalk Halloween special. Yeah, I kind of jumped the gun last week when I said the Halloween specials. I really need to check my calendars. So I decided, to avoid embarrassment, I decided to split it up. I'll talk about one Halloween-related movie this week, and then another one next week. After all, it is going to be Halloween by then. Now, back on to where I was. I'm your host, Alex Savard, and today we are going to be examining a bit of an interesting piece. But, I'll question. Does this sound familiar? If you recognize that jingle, that is usually the ending music piece that is used for the ending logo of the animation studio Rankin-Bass. For those who don't know, Rankin-Bass was a studio that had quite a good run, dating back from the late 50s / early 60s, all the way up to the end of the 80s, with with one or two projects they did here and there during the 90s, and one more thing in 2001, then that's it. What most people know about this studio is the plethora of holiday specials they made. You know the ones I'm talking about. Rudolph's, Frosty the Snowman, Santa Claus is Coming to Town, all that kind of stuff. But at the same time, most people think that's all they just did, when that's not entirely true. In the 80s, they did several fantasy projects like The Last Unicorn, and in television they created some of the most well-known Saturday morning cartoons, particularly Thundercats. They even tackled some Easter specials, with Here Comes Peter Cottontail being the most significant of the bunch. And then there's today's pick, Mad Monster Party. This is one of the few stop motion specials Rankin-Bass did that is based on Halloween. Yeah, the audio is pretty shitty. Hold on a sec. Let me try something else. Yeah, I'm switching it back to this. Screw it. But, anywho, some of you might be wondering, what's this about? Mad Monster Party, huh? Well, let's get into the story first. Basically, Dr. Frankenstein just created a new potion that is able to destroy matter. To celebrate this momentum occasion, he decides to invite all the monster friends he knows: Dracula, the Wolfman, Mummy, the Hunchback, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, and even the creature from the Black Lagoon. Along with one more person, his nephew Franklin. The reason why he invited him was not only to celebrate the occasion of discovering a new potion that destroys matter, but also to pass the torch on to his nephew. This was something that did not bode well with his assistant Francesca, who decides to team up with Dracula to try and take down Franklin. Chaos ensues from here. So, right off the bat, one thing I like about the story is the concept. Who wouldn't want to see a movie where a bunch of some of the more famous monsters from Hollywood would come together for a party? In a way, it kind of predates what... Sorry. Okay, here we go. Hello people, and welcome to part 1 of the Halloween special on Film Talk. Name's Dominic Sabar, the host of Film Talk, and like I said before, welcome to part 1 of the Film Talk Halloween special. Yeah, with Halloween being the week after this, I decided to just jump ahead and make it 2-parter. So you get to hear me talk about not 1, but 2 movies Halloween related. So that's fun. And to start things off, let me ask you guys a question first. Do any of you guys recognize this? If you do, then there's a good chance you might have heard of the animation studio Rankin-Bass. This was a studio that was most famous for 2 things. The first was producing a good chunk of those holiday specials you may have watched, particularly the ones that were animated with that awkward stop motion called Animagic. That was actually done in Japan, believe it or not. You know the specials I'm talking about: Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, Frosty the Snowman, all that good stuff. Some of you might be wondering, aren't you getting a bit too early talking about Christmas? Well, there's a reason why I brought this studio up, because we're going to be talking about one of the few non-holiday projects holiday stop-motion projects they did. A theatrical movie for that. Of course, I'm referring to Mad Monster Party. For those who don't know, the story for Mad Monster Party revolves around a scientist named Dr. Frankenstein, who discovered a new potion that is able to destroy any sort of matter. To celebrate this momentous occasion, he decides to throw a party and invites a bunch of iconic monsters, from Dracula, Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde, the Mummy, Hunchback, the creature from the Black Lagoon, and of course, the Frankenstein and his wife. But there's one more person he also invited: his nephew Franklin, a timid person who has a bit of a bad allergy. I'll explain later why I brought that up. But anywho, the reason why he invited his nephew was for one thing that he didn't tell the others. After discovering that potion, Dr. Frankenstein is going to retire and decides to have his nephew succeed the monster business. This does not go well for Dr. Frankenstein's assistant, Francesca, mainly because she was always by his side during his entire time, so she felt like she should be the one who gets that job, not some squirmy nephew. So she decides to team up with Dracula to try and take him down, but as you can imagine, slowly starts to change her thoughts about him over time. While at the same time, the movie also mentions about a monster referred to as It that they want to avoid. And no, well, I'm not going to spoil what It is. I will just say this right now: it's not the It you're thinking of. Now, one thing I like about the story is kind of the premise, which is just a bunch of famous monster icons coming together and just having a bit of a party. It gives it a more chill vibe, and to see these monsters at a different time when they're not terrorizing people. course, with a premise like no. And through this simple premise, they're able to get in a few solid jokes here and there. I wouldn't call it a hilarious movie per se, but I felt like the people of Rankin-Bass did think about these jokes through, and they have a bit of a solid build-up and solid payoff. Not to mention the simplicity of the story sometimes, can sometimes have a bit of a unpredictable, but also a predictable outcomes. The predictable comes with how, of course, Francesca's feeling starts to change for Franklin. She goes from me. I'll explain that more when I talk about these two individually, but yeah. Well, in terms of unpredictability, that's where the climax comes in, where the reveal of the It monster is revealed, and the crew took full advantage of what the creature was and delivered one fun climax. Not to mention, even though we're told Franklin is an important character from the beginning, considering his ties with Dr. Frankenstein, he's surprisingly absent for like most of the middle part of the movie. At first, he has a bit of good screen time in the beginning and towards the end, but for the middle, he's just stuck on the boat, and we only see him, and a good amount of time in the movie pass before we finally see him leave the boat. Thankfully, we are shown the monsters having fun with one another, but it probably would have been better if they also cut back to Franklin a few times, just so we can get to understand him more beyond his few simple traits. Now, onto the animation. This is Rankin-Bass I'm talking about. They don't really have Disney quality animation, and with here, it's just as stiff and awkwardly animated as their holiday specials. Right down to having facial expressions that are sometimes well done, to other times looking ugh. Francesca. But I'm not gonna knock down these visuals for entirely. For one, I do like, even if the character animation isn't that great, I do like the designs of the characters and especially with the monsters being decent caricatures of the creatures they are. And the island is not that bad. Where they all hang around is not badly designed either. As well as the store Franklin was seen in at the beginning. Kind of have a dollhouse quality to it that does suit the puppets used for the characters pretty well. Though Frankenstein's castle leaves a lot to be desired. It's not badly designed, and it has a lot of details here and there. But try this. Close your eyes and say, Frankenstein castle. Now think of the most generic cookie cutter design of a castle you can think of. That best describes how the castle looks like in the movie. That, and going back to the character animation, while the mouth movements are passable for the most part, the one character who has the worst mouth movements has to be Dr. Jekyll. Sometimes, I don't know if it's because it was shot at its different angle, or it's hard to see it, but there are times when he talks, but we don't see his mouth moving. I know it's because he has a big chin and it would have been a pain in the butt, but there's being artistic with your corner cutting, and there's being a bit careless. That falls into the category of being careless. Character-wise, I feel like this movie has a good has a pretty good roster. I'll start off with the best of the bunch, which is, believe it or not the monsters, nor Franklin or the Doctor, but Francesca. Not only does her voice actress do a good job voicing her, but I do like how she's portrayed as this like sad woman who. I do like how she's portrayed. I like her personality, and the fact that moving on. But with that said, let's talk about how her feelings with Franklin are in the movie. Like I said before, when she first meets him, or at least heard about him the first time, she was understandably pissed, given her long history with the Doctor and that she wanted that job position of power he has so badly. My problem with it is not that she falls in love with Franklin. I'm okay with that. It's just the pacing and what kind of happens to her towards the end. What I mean is that, without getting to spoilers, the first time she was saved was the time where all negative thoughts towards Franklin are erased from her. And when she does start to fall in love with him, that's when she becomes more of a damsel of distress. It's not enough to really destroy her character from the rest of the movie per se, as I still enjoyed her, but I just felt that was just more like a out of place 180 degree turn for her. As for the Doctor himself, even if there's not much to say about him, I did find it funny how they got Boris Karloff to be the voice of the Doctor. Mainly because if you know the filmography of Karloff, then casting him into this sort of movie would be a total "I see what they did there" situation. No. As for the monsters, I feel like there's a half good solid and a half that's forgettable. What I mean is that while some monsters get a good amount of screen time, others are just by the wayside and with not much to do. For example, while Dracula is given a bit more screen time, almost serving as a pseudo-secondary antagonist, what with him teaming up with Francesca for the first night in the movie. Then you have people like the Hunchback, the Mummy, Creature from the Black Lagoon, and the Wolfman, who don't really get that much screen time and don't really have a chance to really shine. As for any other monsters that I did like, Frankenstein and the Wyvern that were pretty good. And then we have the main character, and probably the weakest of the bunch, Franklin. While there's nothing really wrong with him per se, my problem is that there's not that much to him. Well, he's timid, and he has allergies, and that's it. It doesn't help either that the movie runs the allergy trait down our throats with a bit of animation that's that gets repeated over and over again. Well, moving on to the last part of the movie, the songs. If you are familiar with most of Rankin-Bass's projects, you know that in addition to doing holiday specials, there's a good chance those specials would have songs. Mad Monster Party is no exception. And for the most part, I would say the soundtrack is solid. It has good beat, and some of the songs are do leave a good impression on you. Though there are so, though I wouldn't really say it's their best. For one, the only song that really served the purpose to the movie was "Stay One Step Ahead," and that's because it was Dr. Frankenstein trying to convince Franklin why he should take the position and continue as a way to continue the family legacy. But that's not the only problem. The other two is that there's not enough songs, and because of that, it feels like the songs are too spaced out to the point where I sometimes forget this is a musical. Oh well. Even if those are the issues, at least the songs are still fun to listen to. And before I close off this review, there's a funny thought popped into my head when I was watching this. While I did know about this movie prior to watching it, thanks to my mother, when I actually sat down and watched it, something started to pop up in my head. There was a sense of deja vu, right down to the premise being something I might have heard before, and the more I thought about it, the more I feel like this feels like a precursor to to Hotel Transylvania. Now, true, there are several differences between the two. One's stop motion, one's computer animated. The humor of one is a bit more character driven and a bit more and has a calmer pace, while the other is fast paced. And while one's animation is clunky, the other one is snappy, is a bit snappy and fits the comedic timing. I feel like the reason why I brought this up is that I just thought it was kind of wonder if any of the crew at Sony Pictures Animation saw Mad Monster Party, and I'm not going to say rip-off, since I honestly doubt that, but more like took inspiration, took some of the pieces that made this a solid movie and applied it to their film. You know? But anywho, sorry about that. Something strange. If any of the crew and because. Sorry about that. Sorry about that. Sorry about that. Sorry about that. Something happened. But anyways, a little bit of technical difficulties there before, but something happened. But oh crap. Come on. Join me for part 2. See you guys later. Bye.